The map up here is a map of Pierce County, and called out on the map in tan are the privately held working forest lands of Pierce County. I should say, I think it's tan. I'm stone colorblind. I can see anything that's not black, white, orange, or blue is tan. So it's the big spaces up there on the map is the important thing to know. And embedded within this map is a little known fact. The largest private landowner in Pierce County is not from Pierce County. The largest private landowner in Pierce County is from North Carolina. It is what is known as a timber investment management organization, and it acts as an investment manager for institutional investors, primarily pension funds, endowments, and also high net worth individuals. This Teemo, as it's known, owns outright or manages for underlying investors about 200,000 acres of timberlands perched just above us in the Cascade foothills between here and Mount Rainier. We all live downstream from these timberlands, and whether we realize it or not, we are all affected by them. And I propose that it is now time for us to change the game, and to do so by joining the game. Pierce County has some of the best timber growing land in the United States. It's now time to come up with the best form of timberland ownership in the United States, and that is a community forest, a forest that is owned and managed for the benefit of the community of which it is a natural part. Before I explain why I think we should do that and how I think we can do that, I want to make something clear. I am not here to bash the timber industry. Quite the opposite. As Aki said, I run a land trust. We're a private nonprofit corporation that acquires and restores wildlife habitat. We work very closely with the Teemo that owns so much of Pierce County. The people we work there are honest, they're straightforward, and when we identify critical lands that we want to acquire and permanently protect, time and again, they have proven themselves very patient and very collaborative in working out acquisitions that represent fair value for both sides. And it should be said, too, that we as a community realize quite a bit of benefit from the simple fact that all these lands are timberlands rather than subdivisions. But that said, we also have to recognize that, like so many communities across the western United States, our relationship to the private timber industry bears some of the characteristics of a timber colony. For starters, a lot of the value in our forest leaves. The profits go east to North Carolina, and from there out across the world. A lot of the timber goes west to China and beyond in the form of raw logs, which means a lot of the timber value goes with it. 90% of the economic value in timber is in production, in turning logs into 2x4s. So when you export raw logs, you export jobs. And to a significant extent, the Teemo model of forest ownership has divorced our forests from our rivers. If you are an endowment officer in Geneva or a pension fund on the East Coast, your concern is not whether the returns you're realizing from your investment have an impact on the recovery of threatened Chinook salmon here in distant Puget Sound. Your concern is whether your investment firm is generating the returns you need and whether it is following the law, which in this case means following the regulations governing timber harvest and salmon. Now, our state regulations are a whole lot better than they used to be, but are they working? Almost certainly not. Puget Sound recovery of salmon is not working out well. Timber practice almost certainly has something to do with it. But our current regulations, although they're a lot better than they used to be, are the product of very long and very bitter political battles, and they are not going to change anytime soon. So it's going to take voluntary effort to realize further improvements for salmon. But landowners have little incentive, and in fact, little fiduciary leeway to improve their practices beyond the regulatory requirements. They don't suffer the consequences of those practices. We do. Our salmon are disappearing. Now, timberland owners do pay taxes. They pay property taxes, but they're amazingly low, typically less than $2 an acre. Instead, they pay excise taxes on the sale of timber. In Pierce County in 2011, the total of all excise taxes paid by all timber owners came to about $1.4 million. To put that in perspective, the annual budget for Pierce County government was about $750 million. So, 20% of our county's land base is meeting the equivalent of about 1/5 of 1% of our county's tax burden. Let me repeat that. About 20% of our county's land base is meeting the equivalent of about 1/5 of 1% of the county's tax burden. Timber does create jobs, but again, the real value is in production, in 2x4s, not logs. Timber mills are the money makers in a timber economy. But look at my watershed, the Nisqually. We have about 100,000 acres of industrial timberlands. It makes up about 50% of the land base in our upper watershed. There was a time 80 years ago when we had the biggest timber mill west of the Mississippi. In fact, we had mills all over the Nisqually. But as the big old growth timber was cut down and small second growth timber grew up, timber companies found it far more efficient to ship these logs out of the watershed for processing. Today, we do not have a single sawmill in the entire Nisqually watershed. Or let's say you're a timber owner and you clear cut a patch of land above one of the tourist towns on the way to Mountain Rainier National Park. You've generated revenue, but you've also made it more difficult for local lodge owners to put heads in beds because tourists do not want to look at clear cuts. So you have a revenue source, but you haven't necessarily helped the local economy, and in fact, you have probably hurt it because tourism generates far more revenue than timber does. But at this point, let me make something else perfectly clear. I'm all in favor of harvesting timber. In my spare time, I'm a carpenter and a woodworker. I love wood. And I run a nonprofit land conservancy, and we harvest timber on our land. And we sell that timber. It helps finance our restoration work, it generates jobs and taxes, and done right, it improves the health of the forest itself. But what I'm proposing is that it is time to pursue a new kind of timberland ownership, one that's a more practical response to the world we live in, and one that's based on fundamental market principles. Timber investment management organizations now manage a very large percentage of all of the industrial timberlands in the United States. They were a market response to larger changes within our society and our larger world, mainly to changes in our federal tax code, to the globalization of markets, and to the liquidity of capital. Teemos have only been around for about 15 years. They were a response to certain conditions, and now times have changed again. And now, right here in Pierce County, we have an opportunity to change the game, to change it in a way in which everybody wins. We can do that by creating a community forest, a forest that is owned and managed to benefit the community of which it is a natural part. This is not a new idea. The community forest is a very old and very wise form of forest management that used to exist on the east coast of our country but disappeared about 100 years ago. The opportunity we have here now in Pierce County, home of some of the best timberland in the United States, if not the world, is to build a community forest on a scale and in a style that has never been seen before. What if you built a forest that had as one of its primary management objectives the creation of family wage jobs? What if your objective wasn't to generate the most board feet for the least cost, but to generate board feet of timber in a way that put the most people to work? What if one of your products that you managed your forest for was Chinook salmon? What if your harvest practices weren't driven by regulation, but by whether you actually had more salmon in your rivers and had more fish to catch and eat and sell, and for your kids to watch as they grew up? What if one of the benefits you managed your forest for was recreation? What if your logging roads doubled as cross-country ski trails and mountain biking trails so that your forest helped keep you healthy and also supported your local tourism operators, your neighbors who are running the lodges and the restaurants and the outdoor stores in your community? What if the profit your forest had to generate wasn't the 8 to 10% of revenue you had to return to far-flung investors every year, but was the clean water, the clean air, the jobs, the scenic vistas, and the recreational opportunities that your forest provided for your community? If you could make that model work, you wouldn't just change Pierce County. The national park, the national forest, the wilderness area, these are the sort of great conservation ideas that have come from the United States and that the world looks to us for. What the world needs now is a conservation model that balances conservation and the economy, that makes conservation part of the economic engine. If you can make the community forest idea work here in Pierce County, you wouldn't just change Pierce County, you really could change the world. So what will it take? It'll take 3 things. Bear in mind first that everybody wins. The timber investment management organizations now own so much of our timberlands, have to sell fairly often. They have to turn their properties over. A community forest represents one more potential buyer, and if you're a seller, that's a good thing. And we're not talking about charity, or taking land off the tax rolls. We are talking about an economically self-sustaining forest, a working forest. A community forest would generate at least as much tax revenue as timber harvest currently does, and probably a whole lot more if it's done right, because we will create more jobs, and we're going to support a lot more of the other economic activity in the community. But how are we going to buy all that land? Well, here's something that you're probably not expecting to hear me say, but I think that's the easiest part of the whole enterprise. That's not the same thing as saying it's easy. It's going to take work, but a lot of fun things take work. And remember, trees grow. We're talking about a commercial product that grows at the rate of 5% a year. That produces income. That is bankable. And we're talking about a rock-solid investment. Within the next few months, there is a Teemo that does buy land in Pierce County, a smaller Teemo, and without even trying very hard, it will go to Wall Street and will go to Europe, and it will raise $250 million to invest in Northwest timberlands. And most, if not all of that, will end up right here in Pierce County. If our forests are a good investment for a university endowment in Geneva, for a public retirement system in California, they're a good investment for us. In fact, they are a great investment for us because right off the top, we don't have to generate that extra 8 to 10% of profit for underlying investors. We are already ahead of the game in a very good game. And meanwhile, there are an amazing number of financing and revenue tools that are out there for us, and there are more coming along all the time. As of January 1st of this year, the good people of California will pay us to grow trees to sequester carbon. They will support our community forest. Last month, the federal government opened, for the first time, an invitation for grant proposals to partner with local communities to create community forests, to come in on the acquisition end of it. In Congress, before Congress right now, is a bill that would make it possible to issue tax-free bonds tied directly to production from a community forest. And that bill is sponsored by a Republican in the House, Dave Reichert, representative from our own 8th district right here. Last year, our state legislature enabled our Department of Natural Resources to create community forests in consort with local communities. Those are just a few examples. I could give you a dozen more. The bottom line is the financial resources are there, which leads to the next question. Who's going to operate the forest? Who's going to make the decision of, which trees do we cut? I want to point out something that's easy to overlook. Because we have some of the best timber growing land in the country, we also have some of the best timberland mines. Our local forest might be owned by an entity thousands of miles away, but it's managed by people who live right here, and they would relish the idea of showing what they can do for the home team. Remember, too, that in Pierce County we have resources like the University of Washington's Center for Sustainable Forestry at Pack Forest near Eatonville, and is producing graduates trained in the cutting edge of timber management. And we have a network of professionals with some of the best training and experience in the country at things like creating product and distribution networks for high value, high quality wood products. So when it comes to management, we have the horses. We just need to let them run. But we can't build a community forest without a community. We can't build a forest without owners, and that takes vision, it takes commitment, it takes work, and above all, it takes participation. Last year, the residents of the Nisqually watershed launched the Nisqually Community Forest Project with a planning grant from the National Park Service. We pulled together an advisory committee of stakeholders to hash out the major issues. Who is the community? Who precisely will our forest be designed to benefit? What are the products and services it should generate? Where should it be located? How will it be owned? But that's just the Nisqually. Why stop there? Why not create a community forest that goes all across the foothills of the Pierce County Cascades? Why not create a Pierce County community forest? Our window of opportunity is short. We have about 10 years. After that, our forest lands will have turned over so many times that the ownership will be fragmented and expensive, and we won't be able to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So now is the time. A community forest is a reasonable, practical, appropriate, and very healthy response to the important economic, environmental, and cultural challenges of our time and place. And here in Pierce County, we can set the standard. We can be the model. We are the laboratory. Let's go. Thank you.